It seems Sony's interference with the ABK deal and Microsoft has had some unintended self-inflicted consequences. I honestly thought that once the CMA came out and made their recent statements on how the deal is not going to affect competition, I thought things would quiet down. But now it seems things are starting to kind of get a little heated in a different subject. And that is a subject that was brought up at the Senate Finance Committee hearing by a member of Congress involving Sony's control of the market. At the Senate Finance Committee hearing, Senator Maria Cantwell addressed Ambassador Catherine Tai of the U.S. Trade Representatives and Secretary Gina Raimondo of the U.S. Department of Commerce. Ms. Cantwell criticized Sony Interactive Entertainment's monopoly control of the high-end gaming market and accusing Japan's Federal Trade Commission of failing to investigate this exclusionary conduct. And in addressing Ms. Tai, she asks, "What do you think we can do to address these issues and create a level playing field?" I am told that Sony controls a market monopoly of 98% of the high-end gaming market, yet Japan's government has allowed Sony to engage in blatant anti-competitive conduct through exclusive deals and payments to game publishers. Now, I understand that 98% number seems a little high. I would have to agree with that. I'm not the one that created it. It was created by the FTC months ago when they were trying to assess what Microsoft is going to do to the gaming market. So it completely seems that this member of Congress is using the FTC's argument to her advantage to somehow paint the picture that Sony is the absolute biggest dominator in gaming. And this has kind of enraged Nintendo fans a little bit. I have to agree with them, because if you really look at the numbers, compared to Microsoft and Sony, Nintendo is crushing them when it comes to sales and honestly brand recognition. I mean, the attach rate on the Nintendo games is absolutely insane. But again, that's the FTC's argument that Nintendo is not part of that high-end gaming market. But just to also point out, one of the reasons why the members of Congress feel that there's maybe a little bit of an admittance of guilt is the fact that both Sony and the Japan Federal Trade Commission have yet to really come out and deny these allegations. So their silence is pretty much an admittance of guilt at this point. I'm not going to say they are guilty, but they're being treated as guilty because of their silence. And that has led to 10 other members of Congress to deliver letters on the same day that Ms. Cantwell made her statements to the two representatives. And we can start covering a little bit of those details right here. 10 members of the House also sent 2 letters on Thursday to Tai and Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo urging action. 4 Republicans sent a letter that alleges that Sony PlayStation has 98% of the high-end console market in Japan, signs deals designed to keep hit Japanese games from Microsoft Xbox, games like Final Fantasy VII, Final Fantasy XVI, and other games from that market, and says such moves may violate Japan's antitrust laws. This letter is one of 2 letters that were sent to Representative Tai. The second covers similar grounds and is from 6 Democratic lawmakers from the Washington state, where Microsoft is based. And to also kind of have full disclosure here, Ms. Cantwell, the original member of Congress to bring this whole thing up at the hearing, she is supposedly receiving campaign contributions from a large number of Microsoft employees. So this woman has obviously been lobbied by Microsoft. And in my opinion, when it comes to lobbying, that's just the way the world works. On the streets, hustlers have hired thugs as their hired muscle. And in the business world, you have hired politicians to flex your muscle. It's just a way of life. The main thing that a lot of these members of Congress are using to their advantage, though, is Article 8 of the 2019 U.S.-Japan Digital Trade Agreement, which calls for the countries involved to enable non-discriminatory treatment of digital products, which would include games. Now, that whole little documentation, that whole agreement doesn't exactly cover consoles. It's mainly aimed towards digital content. And that's where I really feel that the stronger argument for these members of Congress is going to be how games are excluded from the Xbox console by Sony's really lucrative deals that it makes with people from that region. And one of the other things they brought up during this whole letter to the representatives was that American auto manufacturers have long suffered from Japanese protectionism, and more recently, U.S. tech and gaming companies have become targets. An example of Japanese protectionism is Sony and its PlayStation video game console, which controls more than 95% of the Japanese market for high-end consoles. The Japan Fair Trade Agreement Commission turns a blind eye as Sony violates Japan's antitrust laws with its aggressive efforts to stifle competition from its main competitor in the market, Microsoft, and its Xbox console and subscription service. To incentivize publishers, Sony rewards game publishers for not distributing their games through Xbox. While that goes unpunished, the Japanese FTC aggressively investigates American companies. Sony has recently been involved in aggressively lobbying the FTC as well as European antitrust regulators, while stifling competition from Xbox and refusing Microsoft's offer of a deal that would allay the FTC's concerns about Microsoft withholding or degrading Call of Duty. The 10-year deal that Sony has rejected would give Sony more favorable access to Call of Duty on PlayStation than it currently enjoys from Activision directly. The Japanese government's effective policy of non-prosecution when it comes to Sony appears to be a serious barrier to U.S. exports, with real impacts for Microsoft and the many U.S. game developers and publishers that sell globally but see their earnings in Japan depressed by these practices. And again, they are talking about developers that ship games over there, that want to see their games played by fans of gaming over there, but because of the way Sony has treated developers and kind of barriered them off, it seems that some of Sony's tactics when it comes to exclusionary content are really up for discussion here. And that's the funny part, is Microsoft is kind of pushing this whole agenda. And according to Stephen Totillo over at Axios, Sony's anti-competitive Microsoft spoke to him, and they quoted him saying, "Sony's anti-competitive tactics deserve discussion, and we welcome further investigation to ensure a level playing field in the video game industry," said Microsoft spokesperson David Cuddy. While Microsoft isn't saying just how involved it was in orchestrating this push, its government affairs team has discussed these issues with members of Congress. Microsoft is pulling some strings in the background. Let's just be blunt on that. But hey, Sony was trying to pull some strings in the background as well. I mean, they were passing out Kool-Aid to regulators. What's wrong with Microsoft passing out some Kool-Aid? The members of Congress from both sides of the aisle are pressing the Biden administration to take action on PlayStation Xbox console competition in Japan. In their letters, House members ask that Sony issue be raised with Japanese government and identify additional barriers to American companies in accessing the Japanese gaming market. This is where they want it to where the G7 conference, which is where the United States and other countries go to Hiroshima, Japan this May to discuss economic and trade policies, among other global issues. The president should instruct the Office of the U.S. Trade Representatives to demand fair competition in Japan for American companies. In response, Representative Tay says that while there are currently discussions between the U.S. and Japanese governments over the digital economy, she is quoted in saying, "This is new for me, but let me take this back and I am happy to follow up with you and your team on this." At this point, it seems that this is going to be brought up to the G7 conference with Japan, and I'm curious what that's going to look like. Are we going to see Sony maybe have some kind of rules put against them when it comes to how they can just aggressively make some of these deals and exclude Xbox by just paying publishers to keep their content away from Xbox, because that's technically by terms of market control and anti-competition. But now, are we going to see maybe Sony's hands forced when it comes to Square Enix? Everybody's always danced around the myth, the legend that Sony is going to pick up Square Enix. And what if by some chance it looks like that they're going to kind of crack down on Sony's exclusive deals, and they just decide at this point to flip some of those billions of dollars that they have admitted in having and just purchasing Square Enix at this point, because they realize that a partnership might not just be enough. Because if Japan tells Sony that they got to stop doing this, they might just force their hands and buy Square Enix. But now I also feel that it's necessary to point out that as of today, the filming of this video, Japan has approved the Activision deal, saying that it will not harm competition. And will this affect the members of the U.S. Congress and their arguments on, Japan not enforcing stuff? Because we just saw that Japan let the deal go through. They're not really having anything to say about it. There's like no concessions or any other stipulations they want to see take place. They just signed off on it and left it at that. But again, could we see Sony get called out, especially if some policies are discussed at the G7 conference? Or in the end, could this turn out to be nothing? I mean, Sony could be completely unaffected by this. I really don't see this causing any real big problems for Sony. Maybe just a couple policy changes on how they handle business agreements. Or maybe it could turn it into a bigger issue where it's like an international trade agreement situation, and Sony maybe has to answer to some of its bigger regulators, especially over in Japan, and maybe they might just get like a good slap on the hand and told not to do that again. But if you guys are interested in seeing the letters and the other content that I have used to build this video, please go visit, for starters, Mr. Steven Totillo's article on Axios. He actually has the PDF images of the letters that were submitted by the United States members of Congress. And you can also find other articles that I have used to create this video from Politico, Real Clear Markets, Kotaku, Games Radar. I am Centurion1307. I thank you everybody for tuning in again. I hope you enjoyed the content. For more content like this, please like, subscribe, do all that fun stuff that YouTube likes to see. Please also click on the link at the end of this video to see my last video. Stay up to current content with me. And till next time we meet again, my friends, please always remember to play what you love on the console or platform that you love, no matter what anybody says.